Welcome back to your ultimate pit stop, Piston Pundit. What's unfolding in Venezuela might seem like distant geopolitics, but once you follow the oil routes, it connects straight to the automotive world. Fuel prices, shipping costs, refinery margins, and global supply chains all still hinge on oil. In early 2026, the United States moved to tighten control over Venezuela's oil exports through tanker seizures and maritime enforcement, while China rushed to defend billions in long-term energy investments. This isn't just politics. It's a struggle over energy systems that directly shape vehicle affordability worldwide. Oil, steel, and power, assets that sparked a showdown. At the heart of this crisis isn't a press release or diplomatic memo. It's steel, pipelines, and production hardware planted deep in Venezuela's oil core. In Lake Maracaibo, Chinese-backed infrastructure has quietly transformed from a financial investment into a strategic flashpoint. Floating production units, upgraded terminals, and long-term service contracts now represent guaranteed access to heavy crude, secured well outside traditional U.S. oversight. Once energy investments cross from contracts into physical machinery, they become non-negotiable assets that demand protection. From an automotive perspective, this matters more than it seems. Venezuelan heavy crude isn't just about gasoline. It feeds diesel production, marine fuel, lubricants, petrochemical inputs, and even asphalt used in road construction. These are the unseen components that support vehicle manufacturing, shipping logistics, and infrastructure maintenance. When access to those inputs becomes unstable, downstream costs rise quickly. Washington sees the Western Hemisphere as a strategic boundary line and has made it clear that rival powers controlling core energy arteries is unacceptable. Beijing, meanwhile, rejects the idea of exclusive influence outright. That ideological clash is now being fought through oil hardware, not words. And once energy infrastructure becomes a geopolitical liability, every valve turned or shipment delayed sends vibrations through global transport systems, including the costs drivers eventually pay. But once physical assets become contested, the next battlefield isn't diplomacy, it's movement. And that's where shipping comes in. From sanctions to seizures, America targets the tankers. The real escalation began when Washington moved beyond sanctions and into active maritime enforcement. By quarantining sanctioned tankers and backing it with real seizures, the U.S. shifted the pressure point from diplomacy to logistics. Tankers carrying Venezuelan crude began rerouting, disabling tracking systems, or refusing voyages altogether. Production could continue, but shipment could not. In oil economics, blocked transport is as damaging as blocked drilling. Storage fills fast, output slows, and revenue collapses despite reserves still underground. By early 2026, exports to China had fallen sharply, not because oil vanished, but because risk skyrocketed. Insurers raised premiums, ship owners pulled back, and uncertainty froze flows. A blockade doesn't need to be airtight. It only needs to scare enough players out of the chain. This approach also exposes a larger U.S. objective: control the pathways, control the product. Proposals to reroute Venezuelan oil through authorized channels and invite U.S. firms to rebuild infrastructure reinforce that strategy. For automotive markets, this is critical. Fuel pricing isn't just about supply volume, it's about transport reliability. Diesel spikes, shipping surcharges, and refinery margin pressure all stem from fragile logistics. Cars don't become more expensive because of speeches. They get pricier when the energy supply chain loses its stability. And while tankers are being intercepted at sea, China is responding somewhere far less visible, but no less powerful. Before we delve deeper, do us a favor and smash that like and subscribe button. This helps us reach more auto enthusiasts just like you. Now let's shift gears and steer towards our next point. Contracts over cannons, China's financial counterattack. Rather than answering force with force, China has leaned into something far more durable: contracts, capital, and legal leverage. Over the past 2 decades, Chinese state banks extended tens of billions of dollars to Venezuela under oil-backed loan structures, agreements engineered to be repaid not in cash, but in crude. Even though outstanding balances today are smaller than their peak, the architecture of those deals still matters. When oil exports stall, repayment mechanisms strain, and that gives Beijing a long memory and a long reach. China has framed U.S. maritime enforcement as a breach of sovereignty and trade norms, while quietly reinforcing its claims through arbitration frameworks and debt restructuring clauses. These instruments don't make headlines, but they allow influence to persist even if political leadership in Caracas changes. Financial exposure becomes a pressure plate rather than a vulnerability. At the same time, this crisis accelerates China's broader financial recalibration. By pushing renminbi-denominated lending and alternative settlement systems, Beijing is reducing reliance on dollar-centric channels that make sanctions effective. For the automotive world, this matters deeply. Vehicle manufacturing depends on global financing, supplier credit, and predictable payment rails. When money itself becomes politicized, automakers face higher risk premiums, delayed investments, and rising costs long before a single vehicle reaches a showroom floor. And once finance and fuel collide, the effects don't stay on balance sheets. They show up in the real economy. Oil wars hit home. Why cars get pricier? Beyond tankers and treaties, the real consequences land inside the automotive supply chain. Venezuelan crude plays an outsized role for refiners optimized for heavy blends, especially across Asia. When that supply tightens, refiners pivot to costlier alternatives, pushing up prices for diesel, marine fuel, asphalt, and petrochemical feedstocks, materials that quietly support everything from logistics fleets to road construction. Shipping risk compounds the problem. A world where tankers reroute, disable tracking, or face seizure is a world where insurance premiums climb and delivery windows stretch. Automobiles, batteries, components, and raw materials all rely on maritime transport. When shipping lanes become strategic choke points, automakers absorb higher costs long before consumers notice price hikes on window stickers. Infrastructure uncertainty adds another layer of stress. Increased scrutiny of ports, canals, and rail corridors across Latin America signals that logistics assets themselves may become contested terrain. For manufacturers planning factories, export routes, or regional hubs, unstable infrastructure translates directly into higher capital risk. This episode underscores a hard truth for mobility. Energy security and vehicle affordability are inseparable. Whether powered by gasoline, diesel, or electrons, vehicles remain vulnerable to instability in oil and shipping markets, forces no engineering solution can fully insulate against. Verdict: when global energy battles hit drivers. The battle over Venezuela's oil isn't just geopolitics. It's a live stress test for the systems that keep global mobility affordable. The US has demonstrated how quickly shipping control can throttle energy flows, while China is countering with contracts, courts, and a deliberate push away from dollar dominance. No shots are fired, yet fuel markets, freight costs, and industrial planning all feel the impact. For automakers and drivers alike, the takeaway is clear. Future price shocks won't come only from technology shifts or consumer demand. They'll come from who controls transport routes, financial rails, and enforcement power. Venezuela is a warning that the energy battlefield is evolving, and its consequences won't stay overseas. They'll show up at refineries, dealerships, and ultimately in what mobility costs all of us. Now we want to hear from you. Do geopolitical oil conflicts have a bigger impact on car prices than EV adoption debates? Can automakers realistically insulate themselves from shipping and energy disruptions? Will alternative payment systems eventually reshape how vehicles are built and sold? Drop your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If you want to stay ahead of how geopolitics, energy, and engineering collide, make sure to subscribe to Piston Pundit and turn on notifications for the next vehicle updates and upcoming videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the next pit stop. You can now check out any of the videos on the screen. There's plenty more to explore.